The North Carolina primaries are going to unfold very differently than the way people thought they might unfold 6 months ago. It's probably not going to be a decisive moment for the presidential race. The two key states on March 15th will be Ohio and Florida. But I do think that as the presidential race is concerned, the key drama is on the Republican side. And the basic question is, will Ted Cruz get close to or surpass Donald Trump? Those are the only two candidates at this point that have a realistic shot at the nomination, and so that's how the presidential race is going to play out. And even if Cruz comes in slightly below or slightly above Donald Trump's number, they will both get a comparable number of delegates. So it's more about the story, the narrative, than it is about the actual delegate count, which is probably going to be very close between the Trump and Cruz. When you look down the ballot, the presidential race and the relative proportions of voters likely to turn out on the Democrat and Republican sides has a lot to say about, for example, the down-ballot races and even the Connect NC bond referendum. Obviously, right now, Republicans have a stronger motivation to turn out. They perceive that their presidential race is not over, that it's conceivable that Trump will lose. On the Democratic side, I don't think most Democratic voters truly believe there is still a live option. They believe Hillary Clinton's going to be nominated, so their turnout will likely be lower. If you think about it for a second, if the Democrats that turn out in North Carolina are the ones that still believe Bernie Sanders can win, or that turn out no matter what else is going on because they are core Democratic voters, that's excellent news for the more liberal candidates running for things like lieutenant governor or state treasurer or state legislative seats. So I would expect more liberal candidates to do better on the Democratic side. I don't think that necessarily means that more conservative candidates will do better on the Republican side, because whether you are very conservative or moderate, you've got a candidate that you want to win for the presidency. You've got candidates in other offices. So I think that when it comes to the assumed dynamic between the, quote, establishment and the anti-establishment, in North Carolina, I think most of the incumbents, most of the, quote, establishment candidates will probably get renominated. So I don't think there'll be a huge groundswell of opposition to anyone in office that turns out a lot of incumbents in primaries. I doubt it, but no one really knows, because these races are not closely polled. If we talk about the Connect NC bond referendum for a second, that's a big issue for the institutions and communities that would get projects, whether they be universities, community colleges, parks, National Guard armories, and water and sewer projects. But it's also a big issue for Pat McCrory. He's put a lot of his political capital behind the Connect NC bond. If it passes, that will likely do him a fair amount of good. He will be perceived as effective, as having persuaded voters to take out a fairly large loan because the buildings were worth it. If the Connect NC bond fails, you can look for Democrats to blame McCrory, blame Republicans. And you can look for McCrory and the Republicans to note that there hasn't been a whole lot of very vocal support across the aisle. In other words, the Democrats kind of know that Connect NC, while it's about bonds, is also to some extent about McCrory's leadership, and they do not seem enthusiastic, as you might expect, to give him that vote of confidence. So I think the Connect NC bond is likely to pass based on the most recent polling that I've looked at, but there are a large number of North Carolina voters who don't know much about it. And if they show up because they want to vote for Trump or against Trump, and they see an item on the ballot that has $2 billion next to it, who knows what they'll do?